All right, so let's start with discussion on basic concepts of data center and cloud. Okay, I think that you will know most of it. Nevertheless, it will give you some idea about few details that we'll cover in the course in the class. Okay, so these are topic. We'll look at computer evolution. Of course, this you know, so we'll skip over it. Why data center and cloud? Data center cloud computing, what is inside data center, requirements of data center and cloud computing services, and OS for data center and cloud. So we'll discuss these topics in very brief. Okay, so computer evolution, I mean, starting from 1950s, uh, so almost like 70 years, technology has grown very fast. This was kind of early computer, and I happened to see this kind of computers when I started working. Computer that I worked on was as big as this. uh, okay, and the CPU here that is shown somewhere here has less power than a CPU today you have in your mobile phone. Okay, that is the growth that has happened in last 70 years. Okay, and then these something that's shown inside the in a blue color ellipse is IO systems, right? So IO system actually acquired more space than the CPU, and it required a full building to have one computer. And then came era of mini computers, and the companies like Digital and HP were kind of leaders in that era. Digital, of course, died little early. Right? Digital computer system. So the computer that I worked on first, which was in Roorkee IIT, was of Digital equipment from Digital. It's called DEC 20 computer. It was quite big. I mean, there was a computer center which had about 20 rooms. Just to keep a, what do you call that, mainframe kind of computer. Okay, then we had era of PCs. Started in mid 80s and still going on. I mean, we have new versions of PCs now, but it's kind of personal computer. Till that time, nobody could think that you know computer can be owned by anybody. There's little story that with me personally, I went, and that happened in as late as 94. I went for Fulbright fellowship to US to study, to do my postdoc, and all my saving was about 1 lakh of rupees at that time. That was 1 year salary, kind of 1 year salary for me. And when I came back, I thought of spending the money, and I had two options: either to buy a computer or to buy a piece of land 60 by 40 in Chennai. And imagine what I did. I bought a computer which became obsolete in next 3 years, and so on. So that time I didn't know about Moore's law. Okay, so the computer was very similar to the one shown here, and then now we have because of Moore's law, the great advances in IC technology. Not only cost of computers reduced, but also the power of computer. Okay, and then came the era of mobile phones, right, which is still going on, right? So we have a small phone. Now we can say small phone. It used to be very big. Okay, and that has that. So initially it was just simple mobile phone. It means that I could do just basic calling, and other feature was SMS. Okay, SMS became extremely popular when mobile phones were introduced, because PSTN phone that we have earlier, landline phone, didn't allow messaging. So messaging was the service, and companies earned a lot of money through SMS. Okay, and then sooner, in few years, around around towards the end of 2000, we have seen that the mobile phones started becoming computer. Okay, when I joined Nokia handset company, in fact, I was in division that was making handsets, and I was leading few divisions of that, and we had one what do you call the workshop where it was discussed that should phones support applications and how, right? And then many people were of the view that mobile phones, why do you need to run applications on mobile phone? Well, there's a computer for that, right? And the people are thinking around those lines, and finally company decided to have their own application development center, right? So it was not as, because OS was Symbian OS, and which is little difficult to make use, uh, which was difficult. It's kind of hard because it was not based on just C language, right? Or it was a variant of C language. So so coming to a point that even at that time when mobile phones were becoming cloud as late as mid 90s, nobody, not mid 90s actually, around 2005 and something, not many people believe that applications on mobile has much utility. And then as power increased, people realize that anybody can develop application and can run over mobile phones. Actually, mobile phones have become a, it's a device, it's a computer that also does voice calling and video calling, right? In fact, video on demand was one of the most what do you call that, futuristic application, where people believed in voice over video, online video calling. When it becomes possible, then there will be a lot of revenue. And then came voice or IP and so on, and then everything changed since then. Okay, so the point I'm making is that we had evolution from personal computer to personal mobile devices, which is a full-fledged computer in itself, right? And then as number of applications grew, there was more and more demand for data, right? And then came cloud computing, and now what we have is something that we call warehouse scale computing. Cloud computing is possible over warehouse scale computers or data centers. Okay, so we'll look at these two things: this cloud computing and warehouse scale computers. Okay, and first we'll see why do we need data center and cloud. Anyone has thought about it? Any thought? Data centers and cloud were not there just 20 years back. They're just beginning to begin at that point in time. Okay, anybody, why do we need data center and cloud?
So that we can have remote storage and remote processing power.
Yeah, that is very good. So computing that you are doing on your device, CPU cycles to run an application can not necessarily have to be on the same computer, but can be anywhere else. Good. And that's possible only when you have fast network, right? Or internet, which provides fast connectivity. Otherwise, this all is not possible, right? And that internet connectivity also has to be cheap. Good. I mean, if internet becomes very expensive, and even checking each email requires you 10 paisa, you may not like to check most of your emails, right? So internet has to be cheap, and secondly, bandwidth has to be there. Because latency has to be less. Otherwise, if you have to wait for half a minute to read an email, as was the case about 30 years back, then you won't like it, right? That's fine. Good answer. Anybody else? But what you answered can be done if you have a very powerful computer. Okay. If I have a very powerful computer that's running your application, then what you said is possible. Something more than this.
Reliability of data.
Reliability anyway, if internet is reliable and then end machine server is reliable, then yeah, you are both of you are correct, reaching towards answer. Okay, so let's look at some of these, right? Main reason for all this is that a single computer, whatever be the computer, cannot handle the amount of data that's being generated and being processed. Okay, so data deluge is the main reason, right? So now internet has become cheap because of the reasons you would have studied. Of course, you know, there is a law which is very similar to Moore's law that says that bandwidth also doubles every 2 years, kind of to 1.5 to 2 years. Bandwidth also doubles for the same price. Now, this bandwidth people talk about the bandwidth at home that's coming to your home, right? So this law says that yes, bandwidth is also increasing, it's becoming cheaper. Now, anybody can afford bandwidth. Okay, as a result of that, and then mobiles have evolved, and there are applications, millions of applications, right? Okay, and all these applications are generating data. Okay, and this data is also being captured. Okay, all right. So and we can think of billions of users using applications like web, Facebook, Twitter, whatever, right? There are so many other applications which generate a lot of data, Instagram or whatever. Okay, and then we have cell phones. Cell phones generate data all the time. Okay, whether you are using it or not, some application must be running and sending messages or some kind of, you know, what do you call that? Some kind of message to user and so on. And apart from that, your mobile phone itself is generating a lot of data, right? Because, you know, mobile phone has to be alive all the time to receive phone calls and send phone calls and so on, right? And note that amount of data that's being generated over so many decades. 80% of the data that has been generated so far, let's assume today's date, look at all the data, you will find that the 80% of data has been generated in last 1 year. That's, we can say, some December of last year till now, 80% of data has been generated, and rest of the years only 20%. And this is all will possibly be true next year also. So that shows the amount of growth that's happening in terms of data. And that's the reason you see data analytics and data analysis, etc., is becoming very important. Okay, and now where do you keep all that data? You look at amount of data Gmail is generating, and that, you know, one requirement that you will use Gmail only if all your previous data is available. Okay, it means the amount of data growth is phenomenal. Even for Gmail alone, every year their requirement of data is almost doubling. Okay, and this all requires very large size data centers. Okay, and not only that data that you generate is discarded, right? Every data is recorded somewhere. Okay, for example, even how many times you have clicked mouse, you know, how many ad impression you had, all the billing that you have done in the past, you know, for example, you have bought something from Amazon, etc. All this data is there somewhere or other. Okay, whatever website you have gone to, all that data is there. Okay, all right, and that data is growing, and that's causing this data deluge. Okay. All right, so all this as we discussed earlier, all this application along with mobile phone and all new ways people are using computers, or even watching movies or entertainment or gaming, everything is generating amount of data, and that data has to be captured, analyzed, and we can see that even look at two applications like particle acceleration and DNA sequencing. Okay, the amount of data these applications are generating, you can see the growth rate is much higher than the Moore's law. Okay, all right, this is 10 times, 20 times, 30 times over data in 2010. All right, so now when so much of data is being generated, it has to be handled, and it cannot be handled by a single computer. Okay, so what do these applications demand? They demand a lot of computing cycles, because most of the things, like for example Gmail, or query processing, you search for something, right, your name, or some device. For example, you may want to buy a mobile phone, you just make a query on Google, okay, search engine, right? What does it do? It requires, it's not doing all these computations, not happening on your device. Your device is just showing those or rendering those images, right? All that computation is happening at the back end. Okay, so it requires, when it's happening on the back end, for a simple query may require almost 20,000 or even more transactions or searches in the back end. Okay, so it requires high computing power, lot of memory. Even single search operation requires a lot of RAM. Okay, high availability. Okay, it means that when you want, CPU and other things, memory should be available. You don't want, when you make a search and internet is kind of, if a backend or data center is down, you will not get any answer, right? So availability is also important, and low access time. When you have sent a query, you can't wait for minutes for it. It has to be available in few seconds, right? At most few seconds. All right, and all these applications, that we have seen here, like cloud email, search, on-demand video, electronic transactions, social networking, etc., requires all these things: high computing power, high memory, high availability, and low access time. Now, there's one thing, that all these are the requirements that we have seen here. Okay, second is that user want on-demand computing. What is on-demand? Can you give an example of on-demand something that you have been using? Any example comes to your mind?
Some credit card.
Yeah, credit card is not truly on demand. Yeah, you get money on demand. Yeah, some sense, right? Any example which your grandfather is also using or your father is using? Maybe assuming that your father doesn't use credit card. Our 2 generations, your grandfather possibly may not be using, but maybe using something else which is on demand. Okay, possibly we have discussed this example. Many people don't want to buy a car today. What is the reason like? I mean, you need to invest minimum 10 lakhs to buy a decent car, and utility of car is not more than half an hour a day. For me, it's less than 1 hour a week. Okay, so most of the time this is not operational. Okay, so my cost of even looking at depreciation, my cost of running and maintaining a car per kilometer goes up to 100 rupees, more than 100 rupees a kilometer. Okay, so instead of that, why don't I get car on demand whenever I want through Uber or Ola or whatever, and they provide me, not only car at cheaper rates at 20 rupees per kilometer, they also provide a driver or chauffeur, right? And I don't have to worry about petrol maintenance and other things. Okay, so there's on demand. So instead of owning a car, which I am hardly using, instead of that, if I have availability of Uber and Ola on demand whenever I want, then I don't need to buy a car, right? And I save huge amount of money. Okay. Similarly, so basically, you can call this car as a service is available to you. Similarly, suppose you are doing a conference or hacking event and you need 1000 computers for that, and hacking event is only of say 4 hours. So what one solution is that you have to buy 1000 computers. It used to be the case many years earlier. For a conference, a company would buy say 50 computers and so on. But today, all these things can be done. You can buy computing power and memory only for 10 minutes if you want, or for 1 hour or 1 week. Okay. And as much you want, you can also change the load, that's the amount of computing you want to do on different days, and you pay only for that. Okay, that's called on-demand computing. Okay, all right. So if you want say 1000 computers for 1 hour, you can do that. And there are companies like Amazon AWS can provide that. Okay, and this all, see today most of the companies, IT companies, don't have their own computer center. Earlier there used to be a computer center, server center, right? I mean, first thing when I started a company was to buy 5 or 6 servers, and then grew up to 50 servers. And in order to maintain 50 servers, we had to have 4 IT engineers. Okay, and so there is a cost of buying, cost of maintenance, cost of support staff, and so on and so forth, right? Cost of electricity. Instead of that, now what companies are doing is that they don't have many servers, maybe just 1 or 2 servers, and rest of other things are there in cloud. So employees can directly connect to cloud. Okay, so that will surely reduce infrastructure costs, human costs. You don't need IT engineers, IT support staff, no maintenance updates, and high security. All these things are now possible through cloud. So so this mismatch that we just so they, I mean, of course this slide should have come earlier, that there is a continuous demand for CPU cycles, CPU power, more memory, etc., and this cannot be solved using any single computer. Okay, so now this, in order to have this on-demand computing model, we need web scale solution. It's like this. So you have thousands of computers placed close to each other, and there is a virtual interface which we call as a cloud interface. So cloud interface providing us on-demand services. Okay, all right. So now we have a solution where we put a large number of CPUs, lot of hard disks, and maybe now flash memory or SSD, and lot of RAM memory in some configuration. Okay, and that provides illusion of infinite resources, short-term on-demand resource allocation, like you may want 50 computers for 10 minutes or 100 computers for 2 hours, and so on. Okay, and now companies don't need to own these computers, so it's less expensive. And secondly, there is access to latest technologies, because computer data center can update their technologies, while companies cannot very often buy new PCs and new servers. Okay, so now we have, what solution is that you create a data center where you put thousands, 10,000s of these computers close to each other. Okay, now when you have 100,000, 10,000 to 100,000 computers, then of course there's economy of scale. Okay, and these computers are not the full-fledged computers that we see on desktops and laptops on your desk, right? These are bare bone computers, right? It's just a rack mounted computers, right? They're very powerful. Okay, and all this buying happens in bulk or assembling happens in bulk, then it is cheaper, many times cheaper, 4 to 5 times cheaper than what we'll buy normally, right? And so it means now we have 100,000 of these computers close to each other, configured in certain way, and there is a, of course, use of high speed local area network inside. Okay, and for outside world they can be accessed over internet. Just a minute, I will just mute. Okay, all right. All right. So now we can say that we are not going to use in data center very high end hardware and software. These, even the software that runs over these computers is custom made, and you know, okay, and we can see this, what is the cost of owning a virtual machine, etc., right, on the per hour basis. Like you can see this for a small computing unit, you'll have to pay $0.021 per hour. That will have 2 cores and then 2 GB of memory and elastic bandwidth, what you call elastic block store. Okay, and you can see the more and more computing you want, then the cost goes up and so on, right? So this, anybody can afford few dollars, right, for few hours. Okay, and if you want, you can buy this. Try doing it if you want to buy something, and you will experience, what all parameters you have to ask for. Okay. Okay, simplest solution to sending data to cloud is just use balloons and use a CD drive, CD to send it. Okay. Okay, all right. So what's the difference between data center and cloud? Data center refers to hardware software infrastructure, which consisting of thousands of network servers for compute, storage, networking element working in concert. Okay, or they're working together to provide solution to end user. Right? Okay, and we can visualize this as a very large size computer that we call as a warehouse scale computer. Okay, so for outside world, it may appear as a very large size computer that can solve all your problems, and that interface is nothing but a cloud. It's a virtual version of data center. So when you use Gmail, you're not bothered about whether it's running over 10 machines or 100 machines, or where the data is, whether it's in, where the data is coming from, etc., right? But the total system view is data center, and then interface view or virtual view is cloud. Okay, it's basically same thing. Cloud is implemented over data center. All right. So now okay, so next is that what is data center then? So data center consists of 10,000 to 100,000 servers. Okay, and they are connected together such that there is a high cost efficiency. There is a less amount of power, because as you put lot of machines together, then electric power consumption also goes up. Okay, and there's a lot of attention is paid. How do you manage that power, right? Power cost is significant part of overall cost to run a data center, right? And that's the reason you will find that many data centers are there in Siberia and very cold places, because cooling cost becomes very less. Each machine generates huge amount of heat. Now we don't realize that heat is generated because just one machine you use very close to us. They put hundreds of machines, then you start feeling, you will get the feel for heat. And that's the reason in even in offices, when you design a small data center or server room where there are hundreds of servers are there, or 50-60 servers are there, then you have to have proper cooling mechanisms. Okay, all right. Now once you have this thousands of or hundreds of thousands of processor tightly connected to each other over high speed networking, then you can run a very compute intensive application like search, social networking, video sharing, etc. And of course this has got to have high availability, which is less than 1 down hour per year. Actually this is also quite high. Okay, all right. So data center can be built for very specific application like Facebook or Google has its own search. For Google search, it has own data centers doing only this job, right? And then we can have data center which all of us can use in the, of course we are using a search data center also, but we have just a virtual interface. But if you want certain number of machines or machines running certain applications for your company organization, then you can get certain number of machines over cloud data centers like Amazon EC2 or Windows Azure and Google App Engine, etc. Okay, so this is just a view of data center. This just shows you how big a data center can be. Okay, the one on the left is inside view. This is a top view of a data center of Microsoft. This is Google's data center, Facebook's one of the data center. There may be so many data centers, right? Google's another data center is Oregon. It's here. Okay, this is top, another view, expanded view. Okay, and this small area is shown here as a building. So you can, and each data center can have thousands of, 10,000s or 100,000s of computers. This is another view. This is inside view of data center. Okay, we can see there are racks here. This is one rack, and there are multiple such racks. Okay, and each rack will have certain number of computers. So each one of these is there's a shelf, and within that there is a computer, right? Okay, and they are all interconnected. You can see wire going up, so there is a switch on top to which all are interconnected. And this is how cabling is, right? You can see the cable up. Okay, all right, just a minute. Okay, so this is the view. You can see the cables running on top. Okay, this is another view of how cabling is, and this is so we can see that there are a number of containers. This is another organization which or the way data center can be organized. So there is a container, and inside container you'll have view of this kind. Okay, so basic thing that you require is rack. Okay, and in fact in your lab also you will have a rack like this. Okay, and servers are organized in rack, so there are some 60 to 80 or sometimes more number of shelves. Okay, and this process note that in data center you have choice of having all the computers of same type. Now homogeneity is very important in data center because it reduces complexity. Okay, so all server and processors are of the same type. Okay, and each rack has top of the rack switch is called Tor switch, which, and each server here or each computer here connects to the Tor switch, which is local area network switch, right? LAN switch. Okay, so this is another view. There is a switch. Okay, okay, you can see this is a computer or server, this another server, third server, and so on. And on top there is a switch. switch is shown as a cross, okay, something like this. And these switches are connected to aggregation switch, okay. And this aggregation switch may also be connected to higher level switch. Now, how many layers of switches you will have depends on data center design, okay. And note that each switch, as you have more hierarchy, there is a more delay, okay. So all these have to be controlled. Normally, most of data center have 3 level of switches. Yeah, of course, it may change depending on data center design. So this is another view that we have a server here, okay, in the rack format, which size is given here. It's a 8-core machine with 16 GB RAM and so on, and it will go here. Something here is one of these. Okay, so it's 7 feet rack which can contain 40 to 80 servers. It has Ethernet local area network, which is 1 to 10 Gbps, and the switch can be on the top, which we have seen earlier, called TOR, or it can also be in the middle depending on the design. And then these switches are connected to a cluster switch, or earlier we have the one which is aggregation switch. Both are same thing. Okay. This is another view of servers, rack, and array. Array is nothing but number of racks put together, right? So this is an array having multiple racks. This is one rack. Inside these are servers. Okay, all right. This is a view of just one of those. This is one of those, what do you call that? Server. Okay, all right. Now, cooling, as we discussed, the cooling is very, very important. And the way data center design, a significant part of the electricity goes on just cooling purpose, right? And is very well, the cooling or heat control has to be very properly managed, and we can see that there's not only air cooling, but also there is a liquid cooling that happens. Okay, you can see something here and this place. Okay, now look at data center monthly cost. Okay, now when we say it's a amortized cost, it means that you are suppose you buy a car and amortize its cost over 2 years. Okay, so you just divide the initial cost into say 24 months, and you say monthly amortized cost of my car is this much, and then you will have to add to that maintenance costs and then petrol costs and so on. Okay, similarly here for a data center, amortized cost is shown here in the chart, and you will see 50% of the money that's spent every month goes for servers, so basically cost of servers. Okay, and then 8% goes for networking, 18% goes for power distribution and cooling. Okay, and then 13% goes for power. Now 18% is cooling, kind of cooling and power distribution. Okay, and 4% is others. Okay, the one here. So you can see that cooling cost is significant, and also power cost is quite significant. Putting these together is almost 30% cost. Okay. So why do we need data center? Again, we need data center to support parallelism, data level parallelism, high availability of fault tolerance. Okay. Now this is very important. We run usually VMs, right? Virtual machines, right? And so let's assume and every machine can become faulty. And in the data center, machines often become faulty, right? So if there's a faulty machine and there are 100,000 of these machines, these need to be managed or controlled. The faulty machine can cause problems. Okay, it can give wrong results. So the faulty machine, the load on the faulty machine needs to be migrated. The first thing that we call it VM migration. If there are VMs running on a machine, that VMs can be migrated to other machines which are working, and then of course faulty machine needs to be isolated and then corrected. Okay, and then put into work again. All right. So it's very important that faulty machine is to be isolated, work has to be moved to some other machine. And this VM migration or load migration, okay, can happen within the data center or across data centers. All right. So the part of data center may become faulty, and then all the workload that's having can be transparently moved to other data center running in different continent altogether, right? All right. Okay. Any question up to this point? No? All right. Are you there?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. So parallelism, first requirement, availability and fault tolerance, another requirement, dynamic management, workload management. Now there it's possible that the part of data center can get heavily loaded. So part of the work, okay, whenever new requests are coming, that has to be properly distributed across machines on data center and also across data centers. Okay, this is called workload movement or management. Um, okay, and all this needs to be optimized such that cost is controlled, latency is controlled, enough bandwidth is there, and so on, right? So dynamic management is important, and another requirement is a multi-tenancy. Now you don't reserve anything for a user. So for example, if a server may run multiple VMs, and these VMs may belong to different customers. Okay, then how do you provide this isolation, resource isolation, right, or security, and so on, right? All right. So that's important. So multiple independent users share infrastructure, maybe same server or maybe multiple servers or data center within data center, and then security or isolation of these becomes very important. Okay, and of course based on that, even if there is a sharing, then SLA, service level agreements on performance reliability, has to be managed. Okay, new workload will come. For example, it should not impact performance of existing workloads or jobs. Okay, so all this is to be taken care of, and all these things we call is a multi-tenancy, multiple tenants, right? Okay, so cloud we can distinguish by a shared platform with illusion of isolation. Okay, so for that we need to exploit technology of virtual machines and hypervisors, and then of course attraction of low cost cycles. Until customers have benefit of low cost cycles, they will not come to data centers. Okay, if they can manage their own center with low cost, then of course they will create their own center. Okay, the whole idea is that it should be very cost optimal even for customers. Okay, and of course we have discussed this elastic service, pay for what you need and get more when you want it, right? Okay, so now you think in terms of what you will need or you will do in order to design a data center of that kind. Now what we have discussed so far is user level requirements of high availability, low delays, or high response time, and all that, right? But when you think of data center, then you will have to also think of data center network design. Now I put in this slide here because you have already done a course on networking, so you can understand it. Okay, so of course you need very high bisectional bandwidth. What is bisectional word here? Within data centers, these 100,000 of computers are connected. They should be able to communicate with each other very high speed because you want very low response time. Okay, so this is not, data centers are not purely distributed system where everything can take lot lot of time, right? Here there is a very tight constraint on delays or response time. Okay, so the routing, for example, has to be done in such a way that communication between two machines shouldn't take more than certain time. Okay, now the question is that what kind of networking you will do and so on, right? Okay, so the next point is a ultra low latency. It has to be less than 10 microseconds. So now the question is what kind of routing? So centralized or distributed? Layer 2 or layer 3? These are some of the questions that designers need to answer. Low queuing time, of course, will be requirement. If queuing delays are high, then then the overall delay will be more. And effective handling of dynamic traffic, because the way traffic engineering is of course a big research area, but there can be demands of different kinds. There can be high burst of one kind of traffic which are short in nature. Unlike large file transfer, there can be demand on bandwidth between two machines or certain machine on a burst. Now note, if there is a burst, then everything goes out of control. Okay, the roads may be empty, but there suddenly there are 1,000 vehicles coming in certain point in time, then there will be delay at each traffic signal, right? So these bursts, which kind of traffic which you call in-cast traffic, where the most, for example, a burst of packets go to a particular port, then all the buffers overflow will happen and so on. So all this needs to be handled. Okay, and then the resource management has to be there across networks and servers, like provisioning, multi-tenant performance, isolation, and so on. Okay, and then of course data center network should also support load balancing, VM migration, and security in multi-tenant networks. All right, so these are the basic requirements. Okay, all right. So now one way we can see how performance can be achieved is as follows, right? So at the top we have multiple cores. Okay, you can see one core, second core, third core, and fourth core, and then we have L1 cache. Okay, and then L2 cache display, and then this is L3 memory. Also, so this is, sorry, not L3. I'm sorry. This is local RAM as DDRAM, DRAM, and then disk. Now this is basically a one server. Okay, something that we have seen here. Oh, yeah, the one here, the one that is shown here, the one here. Okay. Okay, and then within a rack, 40 to 80 of these are connected. So this is a rack level design. Okay, now you can think this has a multiple CPUs and multiple DRAMs and so on and so forth. So for single server, if DRAM, for a DRAM capacity is 16 GB, and then this is latency of 100 nanosecond, and this is the bandwidth. The bandwidth is 20 GB per second for DRAM. For disk, a single server can support 2 terabyte of 2 terabyte of capacity, 10 millisecond of latency, and 200 megabytes of bandwidth. Now this performance changes at rack level to the following. Now because if the RAM of another machine is to be accessed, there will be delay. Okay, so now we have overall higher capacity, 1 terabyte. Okay, however, now we can see that access time or latency is now increased to 300 microsecond. and then bandwidth is 100 megabits per second. Okay, bandwidth will also reduce here, because now you're transferring from one machine to another machine. Okay, while at the disk level you have 160 terabyte of data, and you can see that access time is 11 millisecond, because if you have to access hard disk connected with another machine, then there will be additional delay, and the bandwidth is 100 megabits per second. Okay, so we can now see that there is lower latency in DRAM in another server than the local disk. So it means that if a server accesses the DRAM of other server, it will take less time than accessing its own hard disk. Okay, and higher bandwidth to local disk than DRAM of other server. So we can see that these two things are there. Okay, and based on these parameters, there can be a lot of optimizations can be done. Okay, any question? Okay, and then you can see data for a rack. All right. Now, do you think that the workload on data center remains the same during a daytime? It varies, right? I mean, for example, here the load is maximum at around noon time. It reduces at midnight, and then and so on, right? So load also varies. Now, of course, if the data center is catering to multiple countries and so on and so forth, load can possibly may remain in some range. Okay, but for a country, etc., the load varies significantly, and that also needs to be optimized. Okay, and as the load changes, the power consumption also changes. You can see when load is 100%, then power is also maximum. Okay, when load is 0, even then power consumption is about 50%. Okay, all right. Okay, all right. So now let's come to cloud computing services. We can see to a user, the services that are provided are software as a service. It means that you can ask for, say, a particular designer solution. Say, for example, I am using Adobe software for image processing. So you just don't need, you just say that I want to use this software whenever I want, and I should be charged for that. You don't care, it's running over VM, how many servers, how many memory, and so on and so forth, right? It's just called software as a service, say Google Docs or some application. And then we have platform as a service, where you say that I want to run a particular application on a particular server or so many servers and so on. Okay, all right. So you or you give your application to run over there. Okay, then you actually taking a platform. Okay, and thirdly, you simply ask for hardware. For example, you say that I want a certain number of VMs and so on and so forth, right? Or so much of memory. Then you are actually taking like a basic hardware software or infrastructure. Okay, so these are the three types of services that you can ask for: software as a service, platform as a service, or infrastructure as a service. Okay, another question is that now what we discuss is a data center. What should be the OS for that? Okay, that's a question, right? Okay, so now this is evolving area, and many companies that create solution for web have different approaches, but in general, many of them use something called LAMP stack. Have you heard of this terminology? Anyone? Okay. Now, when we say of OS, we generally don't talk of host OS, because each server will have a OS. It's usually Linux. Okay. Of course, for Microsoft, it could be Windows. Okay. So this stack or set of, or set of software layers that we need are the following. Okay. For open source stack for a Web 2.0 company will be Linux OS, which stands for L in LAMP. A for what? Anyone? Can you guess? Apache Web Server. Okay. Then M for MySQL, and P for PHP, Perl, and Python. Okay. All these basically provides you functionality, or we call it open source stack for Web 2.0. Okay. So classical OS use data sharing based on the following that we studied in the course, right? Multiplexing of resources like scheduling, virtual memory, file allocation, system calls, library, interprocess communication, remote procedure call, pipes, files, etc. Okay. And while data center cloud OS will require something for data sharing like Google file system, key or value stores, programming abstractions like, for example, Google MapReduce. This is a very interesting problem, right? How to provide solution over different data sets. Okay, and then Apache projects like Hadoop, etc. And then multiplexing of resources. So we are not going into details of this. Possibly in advanced course these can be covered. Okay. Okay, all these are, please go through it. It's for your self reading. Now to conclude, okay, cloud and data centers are going to be the way, because these provide you on demand computing, and there is no other way that such a compute intensive application like Facebook, Google search, or even for example Amazon's what do you call that, like Amazon store, and many such applications which are extremely compute intensive can be done on a single computer. These require thousands of computers or 10,000s of computers parallelly running and providing the solution. It means that you need not only cheap cycle but also high availability and high bandwidth. Okay, that's possible only through data center, and which gives you a virtual interface, which we call it cloud interface. Okay, and then of course to that you can connect anything, like you can connect computers, you can connect your mobile phones, you can connect video cameras, and so on and so forth, right? Okay, you can, and all these things can be with individual or in a house or office or cafe or somewhere. All right. Okay, that's all. Any question? All right, then thank you. We'll have a class tomorrow then.